Hi, my name is Abigail Rivera and I will be your timekeeper.
Hi, my name is Laika. I will be the one who will take note the important points of our learning.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I will be the presenter for the whole policy plan of our group.
Hi, my name is Erica. I will be one of the members of this group.
So before anything else, let's start off with defining the problem properly. From the given case of our team, it will be the case number 5, which is the right to social progress and development for an exploitation. So let's go ahead and find some articles and some documentation that is related to these issues.
Oh, this article is interesting. I found this article or news article that says that this upcoming FIFA World Cup in 2022 it will kick off in Middle East Qatar. But without the 2 million migrant workers, the 2022 World Cup simply would not be possible in Qatar. So men and women, mostly from Africa and Asia, are building the stadiums, the roads, the metro, and they will be providing the security for the football teams, the matches, and transportation for fans and taxis to the games. So greeting them in hotels and serving them in restaurants at the tournament edges closer. But in the decades since Qatar was awarded the right to host the World Cup, exploitation and abuse for the workers has been rampant, and with workers exposed to forced labor, unpaid wages, and excessive working hours. According to this news as well, today the reality for many migrant workers in Qatar remains harsh and will continue to be so until the reform process is completed, as well as far better implemented practice and enforced effectively. The government must also take further measures to ensure protection of all workers, because while the latest legal changes may be easier, it can't escape the abusive situations of the migrant workers. So they are unlikely to put an end to the abuse itself. So weak implementation and enforcement of some of the reforms introduced in the recent years and detailed above means thousands of workers have been left without mercy or unscrupulous employers. So however, the system remains ineffective, and thousands of migrant workers still suffer from late or non-payment of their wages. So having often taken out high interest loans to pay costly and illegal recruitment fees, such as delays, can be devastating for workers. And ever since the World Cup started, human rights groups have been criticized.
I think that's a great choice. As you mentioned, migrant workers' rights with employers in Qatar. The kafala system of sponsored-based employment in Qatar, which contractually ties foreign employees to their employer, is at the root of the abuses experienced by migrant workers. Amnesty International and other organizations have demonstrated over the past 10 years how the current system, which until recently prohibited employees from changing jobs or even leaving the country without their employer's permission, traps migrant workers in a cycle of abuse. It is crucial that we develop a power plan so that it is clean how to protect the migrant workers in Qatar. 9 employees claimed that they were not paid because their employers claimed they did not have enough clients. 59 employees claimed they were not paid for overtime despite working for more than 10 hours per day. And 13 employees claimed their employers had replaced their original employment contract with one that favored the employers. 12 said their employers took unjustified deductions from their pay, and 20 claimed they weren't given the required end of service benefits.
I think we're all set. So the question of our group is going to how to protect the rights of migrant workers in Qatar. So let's now proceed with the lessons from the past.
So, what similar situation did we have in the past? So, upon checking it here, after Filipino domestic worker Genevieve Villavende was discovered dead from severe injuries at her employer home in December 2019. So, the Philippine government imposed a total ban of immigration of domestic workers to Kuwait in January 2020, and her employer have been charged with murder. So according to Philippine government report, Villa Bende, 26 years old, was sexually abused before she died. So the Philippine government lifted the ban about a month later, stating that appropriate charges against the perpetrators were being filed in Kuwait court. So the Philippines has previously prohibited domestic workers from traveling to Kuwait. So when another Filipino domestic worker in Kuwait named Joanna Dema Felix was discovered dead inside a freezer in an abandoned house in 2018. So the two countries engaged in diplomats pact. So several months later, the ban has been lifted when the two governments signed an agreement to protect the rights and welfare of Filipino workers in Kuwait. However, the rights specified in agreement are minimal.
Um, so yeah, as mentioned by Laika, the Philippine government imposed a total ban of the immigration of the domestic workers in Kuwait. So the Philippines Department of Labor and Employment, or the DOLEC, ordered a temporary ban on Filipinos seeking to migrate to Kuwait for work. So we solved this issue since the government had imposed a total ban in February 12, and the Philippines ordered a total ban on the even on the new workers in Kuwait. So President Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines has also told employers in Kuwait and other Middle Eastern states to treat Filipinos as human beings.
I think the fact that we are all humans means we all have a certain fundamental rights, right? They represented crucial societal ideas like justice, respect, equality, and dignity for all of us, but especially those who have might experience abuse, neglect, or isolation. They're a crucial form of protection. It is also essential that the future tourism, as future tourism professionals, I think it is crucial for us to learn about immigrant perspective to able to help them.
Now, in 2020, as what you have mentioned a while ago, the Philippine government has implemented a total ban on the migration of domestic workers to Kuwait. This is because back in 2019, a Filipino domestic worker was found dead from severe injuries at her employer's home, and seems like she was raped. Now, this total ban worked because the abuse stopped, but only for a short period of time. After a month later, the Philippine government lifted the ban because Kuwait government said that they will take care of the incident, but it seems like nothing happened because there were no news regarding the imprisonment of the killer. Thus, the total banning of the migration did not work as well since it is unclear whether these measures are effective. This happened before, which is in 2018 again, when a Filipino domestic worker in Kuwait was found dead inside the freezer in an abandoned house. Then the Philippine government implemented their total ban again, but it was lifted because the Kuwait government and the Philippine government agreed, stating that Kuwait will protect the rights and welfare of the Filipino workers, but the abuse still continues.
So, the agreement forbids companies from taking employees' passports and cell phones and stipulates that they are entitled to accommodation, food, health, and health insurance. For this research, Human Rights Watch interviewed more than 93 migrant workers who were employed by more than 60 businesses or employers and looked over legal records and reports. According to Human Rights Watch, the Philippines' recent prohibition on Filipinos moving there for employment is expected to lead to an increase in mistreatment of employees who are compelled to use dangerous and unregulated employees. Instead, Kuwait and the Philippines should come to an understanding of important reforms that would better protect foreign domestic workers in Kuwait.
I see. So, from this issue or lessons from the past, what do you think should be avoided this time?
So I think the Philippines should work with Kuwait to protect workers rather than ban them from migrating, which is more likely to cause them more harm than help. So the Philippine government should share and consult on the draft agreement with domestic workers, local non-governmental groups, and trade unions, and ensure that agreement is being carried out. And the Philippine embassy should ask employers to register domestic workers when they arrive and should check in with workers periodically before they leave about their working conditions. So the Philippines should also increase oversight and effective monitoring of recruitment agencies so they do not deceive workers or charge them recruitment costs or fees and ensure that there is an expedited complaints process for returning workers to file complaints against agencies. Many workers says they find the current process too lengthy and drop cases so that they can leave the Philippines to find new work. Then both Kuwait and Philippines have opportunity to work together to increase protection for domestic workers and fix the gap that are leaving workers vulnerable to extreme abuse.
So thank you for sharing all of those. So with this, let's proceed to uncover the assumptions underlying the problem. So let's now identify the people and even factors which need to be considered on planning with this issue.
So yes, we all know that what are the assumptions like facts, feelings, and opinion that we and other key people have about this issue.
So yeah, I agree. So we have to be clear and let's go and check them out.
So I have listed the key stakeholders and assumption about them. So first would be government integration have also chosen to capitalize on existing consular network by instructing consulate to interact with labor migrants more systematically, provide help in destination countries, and ensure that migrants maintain their links to their homeland. Next would be so among migrant origin country in Southeast Asia, the Philippines has the largest diplomatic footprint. For instance, the Philippines has the largest diplomatic footprint, maintaining 88 offices in 65 countries. So, and it says here that the composition of diplomatic staff has also evolved to accommodate migrants' needs and interests. Services at embassies are provided through consular officials who attend to consular issues such as policy cases and resolution of workers, irregular status, labor attaches, and who address and contract employment related matters. So another key stakeholder would be Department of Labor and Employment and Department of Foreign Affairs. So these two key departments heavily involved in migrant issues. So the dollar promotes gainful employment opportunities and optimize the development and utilization of countries' manpower resources. So the DFA coordinates the foreign affairs work of local and central government departments and consult with other foreign affairs departments to advise on handling of serious violation of foreign affairs and law and regulations. So next would be National Reintegration Center for Overseas Filipino Worker, or also known as NRCO. It is a one-stop center for all reintegration services of overseas Filipino workers and their families. So the NRCO was also intended as a service networking hub, a coordinating body that would link OFWs and their families with all stakeholders and services provided that can cater all to their needs. So lastly, the uh, overseas worker welfare administration. It's a national government agency vested with special function of developing and implementing welfare programs and services that responds to the needs of its members, OFWs, and their families.
I agree with everything you mentioned. On the other hand, I think these are the assumptions that must be true about the issue for successful implementation. For the first one, promising legal forms to improve the working Improving the living and working conditions is necessary for these issues' proper implementation in order to prevent migrant employees from feeling mistreated by their employers. And then, second, setting up new labor courts and putting in place initiatives to compensate those who suffered abuses such as wage theft. Human Rights Watch conducted interviews with 16 migrant workers from various countries, as well as an additional 13 business and government representatives who are knowledgeable about current compensation practices and employment laws. Employers need to make up for abuses like wage theft suffered by their employees. Research indicates that a wide, comprehensive, corrective program could benefit from the records and compensation plans already in place in both Qatar and the other countries' operations, despite the fact that these systems are insufficient on their own to address the extent of the abuses. Lastly, introducing a law for domestic workers and legislation to protect workers. The Act itself instituting policies for the protection and welfare of domestic workers, Republic Act 1036-1, generally known as the Domestic Workers Act or Batas Kasangkahayan, was passed into law by the Philippine government on January 18, 2013. The Act protects domestic workers from abuse, debt bondage, and the worst types of child labor in domestic employment and was based on the ILO Domestic Workers Convention 2011 number 189. It establishes minimum requirements for wages, rest periods, and other benefits for domestic workers.
Thank you. So, guys, I guess we're all set. So, let's move on with developing a vision of possible solutions. So, this step of the process is about imagining actual scenarios in Qatar. So, let's discuss what are the possible options and solutions we can dream about to solve this issue.
Okay, firstly, I think we need to dismantle the Kalaka system, which gives employer excessive control over migrant workers' legal status and to implement other labor reforms like lifting the abuse exit permit requirement for most workers, which prevented migrants from leaving the country without their employer's permission. Also allowing migrant workers to change jobs before the end of their contracts without first obtaining their employer's consent. And a new law establishing a non-discriminatory basic minimum wage for all workers. We also need to set up labor dispute resolutions designed to give workers a more efficient and faster way to pursue grievances against their employers and to establish a worker support and insurance fund, partly designed to make sure workers are paid unclaimed wages when companies fail to pay, and introduce amendments and set stricter penalties for employers who fail to pay their workers' wage.
I definitely agree. Wage protection measures can protect workers from wage abuse itself. Qatar dismantles the kafala system, and this is important because it's entirely and will allow migrant workers to join trade unions and advocate for their own rights. So workers are likely to continue to suffer abuses and exploitation, while some reforms have been introduced. Key elements that facilitate abuse still remain. I also heard that migrant workers remain completely dependent upon their employees to facilitate entry, residence, and employment in the country. So, with employers responsible for applying for and even renewing workers' residency and work permits. So, workers can find themselves undocumented through no fault for their own, but employees call to carry out these obligations, and it is the workers, not their employees, who suffer the consequences. So Qatar also continues to impose harsh penalties for absconding when a migrant worker leaves their employer without permission, even though they are being abused. So these provisions can continue to drive exploitation and forced labor practices, particularly against workers, especially laborers and domestic workers, often depend on employers not just for their jobs but for housing and food as well.
So, another concerning abuse of migrant workers in Qatar specifically relates to construction workers and other workers laboring outdoors protect the lives of millions of migrant workers who do grueling work in often unbearably hot and humid weather conditions for up to 12 hours a day, for 6 and sometimes even 7 days a week. Qatar authorities should adopt and enforce adequate restrictions on outdoor work to protect the lives of migrant construction workers who are at risk from working in the country's intense heat and humidity. In addition, authorities also should investigate the causes of migrant workers' death, regularly make public data on such deaths, and use the information to devise appropriate public health policies. In 2013, health authorities reported 520 such deaths of workers from Bangladesh, India, and Nepal in 2012, of whom 385 or 74% died from unexplained causes. Qatari public health officials have not responded to requests for information about the overall number and causes of deaths of migrant workers since 2012. The lack of transparency on migrant who worker deaths has made it difficult to assess the extent to which extreme weather conditions are harming those working couples. The authorities have failed to implement two key recommendations from that report. First, Qatar has not reformed its law to allow autopsies or post-mortem examination in cases of unexpected or sudden deaths, which the report says should be performed in any case of sudden or unexpected death.
Oh, I agree. So with that, let's go and proceed with finally deciding on a solution by seeing its pros and cons.
So let's explore the pros and cons of each option to decide for a solution. So our first option is protection of domestic workers' rights from the employers that should be approved by the Ministry of Administrative Development and Labor and Social Affairs. So the pros in here is this option will give more security to our OFWs, right? So since from the word itself, protection of the domestic workers' rights. The concept here is even though there is already a Republic Act 11641, an act of creating the Department of Migrant Workers, which is already assisting the concern of our OFWs pertaining to the case of abuse in Qatar, this kind of laws don't really work in the long run because whatever happens in Kuwait, you saw that it didn't last the total time.
Yeah, it's just for months, right?
Yes.
So our next option is the implementation of awareness programs like seminars and workshops. The process here is this option should be also under the government's control to make it more legal since what we'll do here is we're gonna be pulling out or we're gonna be fetching for Filipino workers out of their employers' houses. And this instance will give them the opportunity to report any of their concerns to the Philippine government, for example, if they are being abused by their employers. So the concept here is some of the employers may not cooperate with this awareness program, especially on the part of fetching the employees on the household of their employers. Because even though it will be legal, not every employer will agree to this program. They might be a little bit sensitive. So dismantling, our third option is dismantling the kafala system. So you mentioned a while ago that it will provide excessive control to the employees, right?
Yeah.
So in removing the kafala system, the process here is this will remove the excessive control or access of any foreign employers to OFWs, which will prevent them in making any
Abuses.
kinds of abuses. So our fourth option is transparency on migrant workers' deaths. So the process here is this will shed light on the real situation of what our overseas Filipino workers are going through, and possibly will be more public exposure, which will bring Qatar in a corner where they'll be pressured to make legal action in stopping the abuses. So the concept here, we know this already that this option will not make Qatar government be 100% honest, even the Philippine government does this, because public
even though the Philippine government didn't do anything about it. So our fifth option is adaptation and enforcement of adequate restrictions on outdoor works to protect the lives of migrant construction workers who are at risk from working in the country's intense heat and humidity. So this can be applied in hot temperatures countries like Saudi Arabia. So the pros in here is this option is similar to our option number one on the part of providing security and insurance in the lives of our migrant workers, Filipino workers working on construction buildings or sites. And the concept here is, although we're going to be implementing this option, we can still stop accidents from happening on construction sites or any other outside situated jobs from happening. But still, this option will monitor the state and well-being of Filipino workers.
I think we can sum up our recommendation as first, protection of domestic workers' rights from the employers that should be approved by the Minister of Administrative Development and Labor and Social Affairs. Second would be implementation of awareness programs like seminars and workshops. Third would be dismantling the kafala system. And the fourth one would be transparency on migrant worker deaths. And lastly, adaptation and enforcement of adequate restriction on outdoor work to protect the lives of migrant construction workers who are at risk from working in countries' intense heat and humidity.
Okay, so thank you for providing those recommendations. So let's proceed with developing a strategy for implementation. So we should answer what are the plans and strategies we need to implement for each option provided on the part. So the first one, as you mentioned, we need the protection of domestic workers' rights from the employers that should be approved by the Ministry of Administrative Development and Labor and Social Affairs. So to be able to achieve this, we have to ensure that the workers have decent work. So the employer must ensure good treatment of the worker, including respect, preservation of dignity, physical integrity, etc. So the employer should also provide workers with adequate food and housing and appropriate health care. So we also need a proper working hours for our workers. So maximum of 10 hours per day, including breaks for worship, rest, and meal times. So we also need right compensation for their services. So the law should oblige the employer to properly pay the employee for his or her service, as well as any other amounts due to the employee. So for the second option we have is that we have to implement awareness programs. And for us to be able to do this, we need to serve it through manuals or videos for domestic workers and employers to watch. We can also implement awareness by raising events like seminars every month should be organized in cooperation with the International Domestic Workers Federation. We also need the participation of the Ministry of Administrative Development and Labor and Social Affairs on creating a workshop event about on gender-based violence. And as you mentioned, we also need to dismantle the kafala system. So to be able to do this, we have to lift the abusive exit permit requirement in Qatar. So employers and employees should also be allowed to terminate a contract before the end of its term as long as they adhere to the legal notice period. So we need to allow migrant workers to change jobs as well. Foreign workers have the right to change jobs if their contract is terminated and legal procedures are in place. If for example, an employee does not receive their wages or allowances at the end of their contract. We also need to set up labor dispute resolution. So this will be designed to give workers a more efficient and faster way to pursue grievances against their employers, just in case there are exploitation that or abuses that's happening. So we also need to establish a workers' support or insurance fund. So the Qatari government should provide a fund to support workers, including by reimbursing their unpaid wages or benefits. So to be able to be transparent on migrant workers' debts, we have to release data on migrant workers' debts broken down by age, gender, occupation, and their cause of death. We also need to amend to the law number 2 of 2012 on autopsy human bodies to require medical examinations and allow forensic investigations, including autopsies if necessary, into
So, what if, like, without it or if it fails to be followed or implemented, um, there cannot be stability, protections from harm, or long-term peace. No democracy, equality, or voice, human rights must be protected and preserved to guarantee that each person can live a life of dignity and one that is deserving as a human being. So the plan B that I want to propose is that any violations in Qatar labor laws, government needs um, fines, license revocation, and other disciplinary actions must be given to the employees. Since, based on my research, according to the regulatory framework governing migrant workers in Qatar 2019, they are subjected to fines up to 25 Qatari reals. Um, so by increasing the fines to 500 Guarati reals, then the employers will be forced to follow the rules since fines are effective since the likelihood of repeating offenses was higher for offenders who received harsher penalties than those who received lighter ones. The payment of a fine might be such an indirect form of retribution that the offender might not experience a sense of loss and thus might not feel discouraged from committing further crimes.
I see. So let's go ahead and check the required resources and let's delegate. So what are the resources needed? You guys have any idea?
True. I have one. So, Coin Philippine Recruitment Company is pioneering the use of digital technology to bolster ethical recruitment. The owner is a former overseas Filipino worker. So, the LSBS Recruitment Solution Corporation uses what is called an advanced recruitment management system, or also known as ARMS, a communication or storage platform for application of overseas job and deployed migrant workers. Applicants create their own login accounts in ARMS, which is an online record of the history of transaction and messages between the applicant or worker and the recruitment firm. And the system also has a personalized auto messaging feature asking about the worker's condition on crucial dates of his or her deployment to encourage staying in touch with the field.
I see. Okay, so I agree with that resource, but let's go ahead and try to find some resources that would help us be successful in this planning session. Let's try to check. they abuse the workers or migrant workers into creating this World Cup for it to be successful. So they use hundreds and thousands of workers and abuse them. So with this one, I think FIFA World Cup, they should work with Qatar and other partners to set up a program to provide remedy for hundreds of thousands of workers involved in exploitation, just to make this program successful. So to help fund this, FIFA should reserve an amount at least equivalent to the $440 million prize money provided to teams participating in the tournament. So this can be invested in funds to compensate workers and initiatives to improve workers' protections for the future. So this is easily doable, given the organization will make over 6 billion in revenues from the tournament and has over 1.6 billion of reserves. So as you can see, $200 billion is how much Qatar spent for the World Cup. So $6 billion is how much FIFA is expected to generate from the World Cup, and $400 million is how much FIFA should reserve to compensate its workers.
Okay, and one of the resources needed for this plan to be successful is the ILO, or the International Labour Organization. The UN Special Agency on Labor Issues has been dealing with labor migration since 1919. It has pioneered international conventions to guide migration policy and protection of migrant workers. All major sectors of ILO standards, employment, social protections, and social dialogue work on labor migration within its overarching framework of decent work for all. ILO adopts a right-based approach to labor migration and promotes tripartite participation like governments, employers, and workers in migration policy. It provides advisory services to member states, promote international standards, provides a tripartite forum for consultations, serve as a states, serves as a global knowledge base, and provides technical assistance and capacity to building constituents. ILO has recently developed a multilateral framework on labor migration to guide its constituents in labor migration policy.
Okay, so we reached the end of our power planning session. We hope this discussion helped us find some options that may help to stop the abuse of all migrant workers in the world.
Yes, I actually agree since I heard 95% of workforce in Qatar are migrant workers. So it's sad to hear that there is a foreign exploitation happening in the country.
Yes, that is why it is very important for us to create a policy plan to help these migrant workers escape the abuses and exploitation. So thank you for your participation, and I hope this will be successful.